So far, we've been taking a look at a fairly traditional looking table that represents the rows in a database. It's time to enhance the table, change its basic appearance so that we'll be able to transform it into the views we need for our agenda program. Let's get started. Here's the standard desktop application running, showing us all our fish. And as I said, it looks like a typical table. Of course, in our agenda application, we need a table to look like a daily view in an agenda book. We need it to look like a monthly calendar. All of these are straightforward changes to be made, some of which we'll make with CSS, and some of which we'll make in actual code by changing the properties of our table. So let's get started. Now, when I look at this table, it's nice. The default behavior is to slightly shade every other row. But if we're going to have any kind of calendar-looking table, we're going to need lines around each of the cells. Luckily, we can do this easily using CSS. Let's take a look at some CSS for that purpose. Let me close this application. And here we are. This will be the CSS file. We see it over here, styles.css, that we'll use. The first item is the table row cell class that will be used by our JavaFX table. We're telling it that around the outside border we want the color red and the inside border of a cell to also be red. There are other items that we can use to control the thickness of the line, but I need to leave something to you as a student to discover to enhance the look. Oh, and by the way, red is not a really good color, but it does stand out well in a screencast. I've also added one other item, and that is to center the text in the cell. As you can imagine, you have a range of alignments available to you. A nice thing about NetBeans is if we know the word is center, I select it and I hit dash, I'll actually get lists of what's available to me. If I now get rid of the dash, I'll be able to see the entire list. Kind of specialized autocomplete that's available to us. So with that in place, I need to associate this style sheet with our table. And to do that, we're going to go back to Scene Builder. So I'm going to open up the table for this application in Scene Builder. Here we go under FXML and double click on it so that Scene Builder will open it. There it is. Now I want to find where I can associate a style sheet with this application. I can do that by popping over to the border. This is the topmost level. From here, I have to do a bit of searching because as always I can't remember where everything is. Is it under Properties? There we go. Under Properties, I can associate the style sheet. So I'm going to select the field, which opens up a box that allows me to navigate to my styles and select this. Open. Takes a few moments. And our style sheet is now associated. Let's File Save. So now the new FXML is in place. And let's see what the application looks like now. Run Maven. Let's not do any tests for the moment. And there you go. Those are the red lines. I leave it to you to come up with more interesting or more exciting ways to create lines. Also notice that all the fields now are centered. You can control left, right in any direction. Something else interesting about a table in JavaFX, whereas we have text in each of the cells, we can actually put containers, graphics, pretty much anything can go into a cell. Let's take a look at how we can change the height and even the width. Well, we know the width, but at least let's change the height. Let's make this look more like a calendar of equal size squares. Here is a modified version of the adjust column widths method. The previous version, we'll just take a look at it, decided the width of each column as a percentage of the total width and did not address the height. This allowed the table to determine the optimum height for each row based on such things as the font size. In this second version, because our interest is to create squares, and we have 11 fields, I take the preferred width and I simply divide it by the number of fields. This ensures now that in this width, which as I mentioned was approximately 1500 pixels, we divide that by 11 to achieve the result that we want. Take note of the fact that all of these values, preferred width, all of the widths, are actually stored as doubles. So presenting the value as 11.0 makes it very clear. Again, another self-documenting feature. This is a double, not an integer. The last line, though, takes care of the height of the rows. In this case, this is a command that affects the height of every row. I leave it to you to find the way to adjust the height of individual rows. That's one of the features available to you, and a bit of a challenge for you to track down. So, with this in place, I'm going to change the method that I call. I've actually already done that. If we come up here, instead of calling adjust column widths, it's adjust column widths 01. And now, let's save everything up, and let's run our application again. Run Maven, no tests. And cool! Now we have all these nifty squares. I'm hoping that this is inspiring you to see how your work can become a calendar. Let's add one last enhancement in this screencast. Let's add the necessary code that allows us to change the background color of a cell. To do that, we have to replace the built-in rendering feature of our table. To do this, we use a lambda, we can see it here, where we want to replace the cell factory, or not replace the cell factory, but use the cell factory to allow us to install our own table cell. The table cell matches the data we're dealing with. In this particular case, it is a column that consists of fish data and a string. So this particular approach will work for any column that's a string. We override the method called updateItem. This is the key. This is where the contents of a cell are drawn. Though, before we do our own custom work, we call upon our superclass, the original, the previous version, we can say, or the version we're overriding. That's a better description. And call upon it to do its job before we step in. We can set the text. So here we're taking the item information that we're expecting to receive. Remember, the table knows what information to display because of its connection to our data. If the item for some reason is null or it's empty, in other words, there's no data in it, the text becomes null, there's no style, the cell remains blank. On the other hand, If there was text that we wrote into the cell, here we've decided to set the text fill, which really means the color of the text, to a color called chocolate. It's amazing the range of colors available to you. If I just hit a period here to call up the autocomplete, you can see a pretty extensive list of colors. Not every display may allow you to see the differences between them, but you've certainly got a pretty wide choice here. Let's put back our chocolate. Next, the style. And this demonstrates something we haven't seen yet, the fact that you can actually express style in CSS notation through a method, rather than having to place it in a CSS style sheet. I'm kind of more fond of CSS style sheets. However, for our purposes, the backgrounds are going to change for different cells. They're not all going to be yellow. If we use the CSS sheet for this information, then we'd only have access to one color. Here, we have a choice, or we can have a choice, of a range of colors. So what I want to do is I want this particular table cell to replace whatever is the table cell in the column that I'm passed. So up here, after my adjust widths, I call my render cell, and now I'm calling upon the common name column. I can call this for any other columns that I want. Within this method, I can add whatever additional logic I need. I can examine the contents of the item and use that to decide what particular color or any other effect that I might want in that particular cell. Well, let's take a look what this looks like, or see what this looks like. Don't get too excited. It's not all that thrilling. We're just going to see a lot of yellow. No tests, and let's see what we get. There we go. I've set the first column to a background color of yellow, and hopefully you can see it on your display. The names, or the common names of the fish, are now in a brown color. Well, there's our first set of enhancements available to us in a table.